Bananas.
Bananas?
In pajamas.
Oh! Gosh, I really have allowed the Hideaway to become overrun if there are bananas in pajamas down here. The Australian sentient bananas. It's been 3 years. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hideaway.
Hello.
It's so dusty in here, and maybe not the best state to introduce my co-host to it. So you two, be careful not to sit on any Godzilla figurines. I've not tidied in here in a while. In this location that you're definitely physically in.
Yeah, I will say there's a quite interesting arrangement. Is that a original Shin Godzilla figurine you have on the corner?
Oh, you know it.
Its eyes. Were those eyes always glowing?
Those eyes? Yeah, no, I...
They glowed during recording time, don't they?
Oh dear. I think Android Hindsight is up to some nonsense.
Oh yeah, that's a regular character. You don't know about that, Henry, but you soon will.
Maybe I'll add him here.
Oh boy.
Given the state of my notes for this podcast, I might have to.
Hello, gamers. It's been a while. Trust Hovin not to forget his weird and joke characters from years back. And yes, I am possessing this Shin Godzilla figurine because it makes me feel cool. Roar. Stampy stampy.
Every time we mispronounce Sprechchor, you will just add the Google Translate robot saying it.
Very well. All right.
But yeah, obviously it's been a hot minute. It's been ages since the last episode. So obviously you're probably all familiar with Brie Wensleydale.
Yes, I think on the last podcast you had my twin brother on here. But hello, yes, I'm Brie Cheddar. Hello, welcome. I do Duckface Diaries.
And we've also got video essayist Henry Kathman.
Oh, video essayist. Yeah, I suppose that is true. I have been doing this for God, it's going to be 8 years this February.
Amazing.
Which, yeah, it is very interesting. Henry Kathman, him, does a lot of things on the internet. People mostly know me from Moomin-related stuff or my Centaur World video. People have takes about that.
Also, the stop-motion one. The stop-motion one is, I think, my favorite at this point.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that one. I feel pretty proud of that one.
I liked the Adventure Time one a lot.
Thank you as well. I feel so loved.
Aww.
I feel so loved. Thank you very much.
To get people up to speed who don't know, the three of us had a Pokemon Adventures manga retrospective podcast.
Speaking of Pokemon...
Called Podcastmon Adventures.
Oh.
Where we have tackled
the
ongoing, long-running Pokemon tie-in manga, known as Pokemon Special in Japanese, where we have gone arc by arc, discussing each part, and each one tying into a different game release, but having an overarching canon with returning characters and such. And we're approaching the one for the Diamond and Pearl episode, but the thing about it is that the protagonists of the Diamond and Pearl arc have a very particular comedic style.
A very particular set of skills.
Yes.
Very particular set of skills.
Indeed.
That quite a few Anglosphere readers might not be the most familiar with. So we're delving into a series tackling that particular comedic style. But before we get into that, what have we all been up to? Been keeping up with any interesting media? Doing anything cool?
Well, I suppose if we're going to keep it thematic to Pokemon for a second.
Yes.
I don't know if either of you have been playing that Pokemon Trading Card Pocket game that they had recently released, which is basically the Pokemon TCG, but slightly more like Marvel Snap.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to check that out, but I've played the PC version of the Pokemon TCG game.
Oh.
But yeah.
This is a much more heavily simplified version, where it basically has the same rules as the traditional Pokemon TCG, where you have your basic Pokemon, you evolve them, you attach energies, you have supporter cards, gotta beat a certain number of Pokemon to win the thing. But this time, all the matches go up to the first to 3, so it's not a full 6 prize card thing. And also, energy cards, not a thing. Instead, there's an energy pool thing where every turn you just automatically get to add 1 energy card, which, yeah, I think that's a good simplification for the purposes of introducing this to a mobile market. Although I will say, I've been enjoying it, but oh my gosh, it's very apparent that, oh, y'all really want to sell those premium currencies, because it's all about opening those packs, baby.
Mobile gaming, am I right?
Oh, yeah.
I might still check that out. Obviously, I will be going free to play. I would never fucking buy any premium stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty chill. If you're doing it free to play, I just treat it like every day I just check in. I get to open my 2 free packs. I maybe play a couple of rounds with some folks, and then I stop playing. Some of these folks who be playing like 5 hours a day, I'm like, how? Anyway, yeah.
So yeah, if I check that out, I'll probably announce my ID on Blue Sky or something.
Hell yeah.
And then you can all utterly crush me because I'll probably have a monograss team.
Brie, I'll give you some tips, because grass type's pretty viable. The Venusaur deck alone is just, wow, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. So I've fallen into the inescapable trap that is probably awaiting like a third of your online friends since our last recording. It's a deep and heavy confession. I've become a VTuber. I know.
Yes.
It's a big mark of shame, but someone had to do it, and I had to take that burden upon myself.
Wait, you're telling me, Wensleydale, people can watch you doing the VTubing at, say, a place like twitch.tv?
Yes, in fact,
/ Brie_cheddar?
Yes. Okay, I'm amazed you remembered that. Thank you.
Yeah, they already have a GIF. They have fan art and they have a GIF.
Yeah, oh my god. We have fan art by the lovely Vesper.mp3, his podcast, together with Sammy. You should check out. That's Roll History. It's about D&D and stuff, and it's lovely. But in any case, I've been streaming some Liminal Spaces games with the lovely Spinning Asha, and we have been having much fun walking around back rooms and pools and grabbing lamps and swinging them around and doing wee-oo, 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 wee-oo. Mostly Asha has been having fun with that. I have mostly been the Tsukami in that relationship.
I've just realised that my dog and my cat are in this room at the same time, and I hope they don't kill each other.
Oh no, this would be a morbid end to the podcast.
Ha 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 ha. It was me. I let them in. You shouldn't have given me access to the door codes, Hovin. Oh, the chaos I shall cause.
God, there's so much temptation. I'm just trying to think about ways to do the kind of pun stuff in the spirit of this. I do not have the speed of Azumichi and Taiyo.
What do you think? Would you be a bokeh or a Tsukami?
Tsukami.
Okay.
Yeah.
This would be a great segue, but unfortunately I am a disorganized mess and I have some things to say about
That's okay. Yeah, Hovin, tell us what you've been up to.
So on the video games front, I've been playing Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, which is interesting.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
So the sprite art, bloody beautiful. Strong case for being one of the best looking Zelda games. Really lovely. Colour design, movement. The dungeons are really cool and involved. The overworld is where I have some issues.
It sucks. It absolutely sucks.
There's, especially when you get into some of the areas, like, I'm just remember the Royal Valley up into...
The Royal Valley can eat my entire Godzilla figurine.
Wait, you don't like doing all the parachuting?
Wait, does Royal Valley have much parachuting? That's the air stuff, right?
Oh, I have the air stuff and the Royal Valley. You're right. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
The parachuting is nice, but the Royal Valley is the one where you have to get captured by the ghost constantly and check the directions and fucking read the signs. It's terrible. Yeah. And they don't even have a fucking wind crest.
That's the problem.
You can't even fast travel to it. And the kinstone pieces. We have to go back for the kinstone pieces. It's terrible.
Yeah, I could forgive the kinstone pieces if it wasn't a case of some NPCs just randomly get them at one point in the game that didn't happen before. If it was just consistent across the board of you gain access to new NPCs, they just have kinstone pieces. And areas like the Wind Ruins and Royal Valley that are very out of the way, take a bit of trekking to get to, actually have Wind Crest to fast travel to. It's a very Nintendo problem.
I do recall Mimish Calf being a very interesting specimen within the Zelda series, especially because this was the last one where Capcom was being the developers of it after doing their ports of A Link to the Past, Oracle Season, Oracle of Ages, and stuff like that. But I will say, I do appreciate, considering that it was the last... Well...
Is it the last sprite-based one?
To my knowledge, I believe so. Yeah, no, because...
Yeah, the DS had...
Phantom Hourglass and Spirit tracks were polygonal, and yeah. Oh my gosh, what is the last sprite-based one?
So there haven't been any DS ones, or?
No, they were.
The DS ones use
Yeah.
models.
Okay.
Which, they look fine.
I guess there's the Four Swords games, which I think go on after, but those are also, very decidedly spin-offs.
Well, Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures, that was actually released before Mimish Cap. So Mimish Cap, I believe, 2005, first released in Japan in 2004, but Four Swords released in 2002. So Four Swords kind of predated it because I'm pretty sure that was the basis of the engine for Mimish Cap. But it is very interesting going back to especially those late in life Game Boy Advance games like Mimish Cap, like
Mother 3.
Yeah, Mother 3. I don't know if we classify Fire Red and Leaf Green as that, but I feel like some of those later stage Game Boy games, it's always very interesting looking at a console's games, especially when it's very at the end of its lifespan, when people are way more familiar with the architecture, people are able to kind of push it to its limits, and you really start to see some really interesting stuff in terms of some of the stuff people are able to program for it.
Yeah, it's one of those games, I play through it and I go, I completely see why a certain portion of the Zelda fandom rate this as one of their favourites. I can also see why it's not seen as the standard of classic that A Link to the Past was.
You definitely have to be in a certain mind space to get into it.
Because Link to the Past is very immediate. It's like you go to the overworld, if you have an item that can interact with a thing, you can just do it. And apart from that, I've been watching some anime. On the good side of things, I've been watching Dandadan, an airing show.
Hey, airing, you say? Oh Hovin, you took ages to get this big boy of a podcast out, didn't you? Well, who knows? Maybe by the time you finish it, Season 2 will already be releasing and that description will loop back around to being accurate.
It's about a girl who's really into the occult and a boy who's really into aliens who discover that both of them are real and gain powers relating to the opposite thing that they're obsessed with.
But more importantly, they're really cute together. So
They're really cute, and they have a big rom-com thing going, and they investigate paranormal things. Not like the most unfamiliar anime premise, but the whole thing just brims with personality. It has really fun interpersonal dynamic between the characters. I believe the mangaka was a student of Tatsuki Fujimoto, or an assistant, and you can tell a lot of that rubbed off on him. Because both of them, they tend to prioritize characters bickering and bantering over long expositions of how the law and the powers work, which I find way more engaging personally over some things like cough cough Jujutsu Kaisen. I've not checked out the manga for that. I do want to, but unfortunately I commit to these big long manga wheels and projects like this, so I get sidetracked and I read slowly.
I have devoured like 100 chapters of that in a day in a depression slump that I had, and it was terrific.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I've also been watching Case Study of Vanitas, which is a steampunk vampire manga with magic and gothic stuff in it. The first season was alright. It's very generic gothic manga. If you've read stuff like D Grey Man or Soul Eater, it's in a very similar vein to that, or watch stuff like that. But it had some solid character dynamics, and then I've finished the first half of Core 2. It's not technically Season 2. What the fuck was that arc? It was so boring. It's like a generic filler movie. I'm told it gets much better. I hope so.
It does. The difference is night and day, and I have to endorse it. But in a way, you kind of can't skip the first half of Season 2. So, I don't know, just watch it on double speed or something.
Yeah, it's, oh boy, the climax has happened, and the entire interesting-looking location has devolved into multicolored blobs of magic. Anyway.
Otherwise, very nice shoujo series, I think. Shoujo action series.
Yeah. Is it shoujo?
I'm not sure.
It's a very female-gazy series in a lot of ways.
Yes.
I mean, to me, as someone who's not as avid a manga reader as both of you, I feel that this might be just my outsider perspective, but I feel like sometimes that distinction of shonen versus shoujo and stuff, it feels like a very arbitrary kind of distinction half of the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the time, if that's the case with Vanitas, shoujo can be very action-focused. There's an ongoing manga with a currently ongoing anime called Blue Box in Shonen Jump, which is feelsy, and it's a rom-com, and yeah.
And like, even if you think of it as the target demographics, Haikyuu, the sports manga, and Shonen Jump, the majority of its readership was female.
Or heck, if you even think about something like Berserk, which is a seinen manga, but the fact that Kentaro Miura was heavily inspired by shoujo mangas and stuff, it all just feels like, oh, this is just manga, it's just markets, and all that kind of stuff.
In any case, speaking of manga...
Speaking of Pokemon... Oh, wait, that's not the right...
A wild comedian appears.
I mean, Brie, you're talking about Dandadan, and I mean, talk about some resemblances a little bit with some of this.
Yeah, so, Sho-ha Shoten. The story is by Akinari Asakura, who is mainly known for novels. This appears to be his first successful manga. He had one called Flagger's Equation, which I think was an adaptation of one of his novels, which lasted 2 volumes, and then Rokunin no Utsotsuki na Daigakusei, brackets +1. That is sure is a title, and that was 3 volumes. But this one has been going straight. It's like a good 10 volumes long or something now, still ongoing. And then the art is by Takeshi Obata, of Death Note fame, also known for Bakuman, Platinum Edge, I mean End.
Fucking Platinum End.
The manga adaptation of All You Need Is Kill, the novel that Edge of Tomorrow, the movie, is based on. I recommend that manga. It's good.
Yeah, that one is pretty good. It does hold up. It's very different in a number of places, but still a good read.
Yes. And then Hikaru no Go was, I think, their big breakout. And also Gakyu Hote, and did the designs for the amazing anime movie Bubble.
Oh my god.
Brie, how good was Bubble?
Bubble was shit. I don't know what to tell you.
What? Bubble?
It's a movie on Netflix. It has one of the most notable anime directors, Tetsuro Araki, of Attack on Titan and Death Note fame.
It was basically the megalopolis of anime.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah, the composer is Hiroyuki Sawano of Kill la Kill fame. The writer is Gen Urobuchi of Madoka Magica, Fate Zero's Psycho-Pass fame, and it's the most generic garbage ever.
Okay.
There's no sense of any kind of creative inspiration behind it.
Now, you tell me it's the megalopolis of anime, but does it manage to plow the depths of its Ambersonian mind? Does it entitle you to peer into its genius?
You do some parkour and then you go back to the boat.
Yes. Yes.
Pick up my hat. No, it's the most manic pixie dream girl bullshit. I hate this.
Yeah, there's like a vague sci-fi premise that isn't very fleshed out on a world building. Like, you know, the whole Tokyo's been invaded by magic bubbles from space and is fucked up, but not really that fucked up. There are parkour people who race, who seem to be sponsored by companies, but it's not very well fleshed out. They meet a manic pixie dream girl, Bubble Girl, who is babyfied and can't talk, because that's really interesting.
And they constantly reference the fact that, oh, she's like the Little Mermaid. Did you know that she's like the Little Mermaid? And she actually reads the book of the Little Mermaid. And do you get it? Do you get it now? Do you get it?
Howdy gamers. Just a warning from your buddy Android Hindsight that we'll be spoiling the 2022 anime movie Bubble. Not that any of us recommend it. But if you want to avoid spoiler talk, skip ahead like a minute and you should be good. I'll just stall for time. Rawr. I am a big atomic lizard. Stampy. Ghidorah won't know what hit him. Did you see -1? It was pretty cool, right? Anyway, enough stalling. Back to the discussion in 3, 2, 1.
Then in the middle of the movie, she helps them do parkour, but then at the end of the movie, oh no, the big climax where the evil bubble things do the bubble and lots of particle effects happen, and she has to sacrifice herself, and it's so tragic.
And oh my god, they have 2 separate action scenes where they have to rescue the 2 prominent female characters each.
I wasn't expecting to do a whole thing on Bubble.
Okay,
If roasting a painfully generic anime movie sounds like your bag, go right ahead. But if not, maybe give it the skip.
I'm good.
But anyway, to get back to the manga we're actually meant to be talking about.
Okay, so yes, you might think that Sho-ha Shoten is written by Akinari Sakura, but I have had my lowest stakes conspiracy theory here, namely that Akinari Sakura is just another pseudonym that Tsugumi Oba is using for some reason to hide his identity. The reason being that, I don't know, the series seems very similar to Bakuman in its double protagonist premise and the competition-based approach to creative art, because Bakuman was about creating manga in Shonen Jump, but also some other similarities between the two series and just Oba's writing in general.
We'll get into this a little bit more, but as someone with far less experience in the world of some of these more niche mangas compared to the two of you, it does sometimes feel that you can kind of make a shonen manga about pretty much anything. I mean, Haikyuu already kind of proved that, of like, oh, we're gonna make people just care so much about volleyball suddenly.
They do it with all the sports.
They do it with all the sports, and now we're branching out to every other possible after-school extracurricular activity. Now we got the improv crew with Sho-ha Shoten. There was a shonen manga about Hanafuda cards, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it was shonen. Chihaya Furu, are you thinking of?
Yeah.
I don't know what demographic it was, but yeah.
What do you think a manga called Robot X Laser Beam? What is the premise of this? I'm really curious. What do you think of that, Henry?
Robot X Laser Beam.
Just like a wild guess, I'm going to say it's a sport.
Let's see. Oh, God. Robot X Laser... I'm going to do a very large shot in the dark. Is it like golf?
Yes!
Or something?
Oh my god, you got it!
Done.
You got it in one.
Oh, hell
10
yeah!
out of 10.
Hell yeah. Okay, this is where my mind was going. I'm like, okay, it's clearly not tennis. It's clearly not baseball, because there are hundreds and hundreds of baseball mangas out there. It's clearly not soccer. Laser, accuracy, and distance.
Maybe you should pitch manga to Shonen Jump. I think you've got the knack.
Oh, God. All right, here, guys. I need to tell you, here's my pitch. We've covered all the extracurricular activities, right? I got your new shonen manga here. It's gonna be about the freaking tabletop nerds, right? We have all these fantasy isekai ones where you got the ladies with the big tits, right? No, here's what you gotta do. You gotta make it about a bunch of nerds. They play D&D.
I think that's Yu-Gi-Oh! There was an arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! About this.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
God.
There is, but it's like a very simplified in-game version of it.
No, we are gonna... If you're gonna do a shonen about any niche topic, you need to be the most granular thing. I'm talking like a shonen manga where you have nerds arguing about the intricacies about 3.5 edition versus Pathfinder versus 5th edition versus the new 5.5 2024 update edition. And you gotta have the heel character who's just like really into Lancer and no one else. No, actually, no, scratch that. Not Lancer, Shadowrun. You gotta get some weirdo in there who's really into Shadowrun and nobody knows what the hell he's talking about.
Okay, that sounds all well and good, but how many panty shots per chapter?
Oh, well, obviously, you would have one of the characters. It would be this reserved guy, and his D&D character would be just the horniest lady bard. And you would cut into the fantasy world while they're playing, and that's where you would do all the breasting boobalies.
Literally, like, this idea of you switch between this sort of Genshiken type thing where it follows a tabletop club or something, and like the daily lives of them, and then jumping between the two worlds. You could play around with the art style being really different in the imagination of the fantasy game.
It would be basically isekai, except not garbage.
I need this in my life. I mean,
And of course, you can't forget one of the members. She's gotta be a high schooler with big tits. And you would not expect her to be into tabletop stuff, but that's the twist. The gal with the bazongas is a secret nerd.
But yeah, regarding the authorship, obviously it could very well be that Obata, just as an artist, has a lot of creative input on the series, and it may well be possible. But yeah, this was my impression based on another manga where Obata partnered with someone else to Oba, Nobuaki Enoki, who based on Mal only wrote Gaki Hote with Obata as the artist. So maybe, I don't know, Oba didn't want his name attached to a very noncy manga with sexualized primary school children, I wonder. I don't know, maybe, who knows?
What?
Yep, this ran Shonen Jump.
Jackie Hote's fucking weird.
That's so unprecedented. In this genre of storytelling, sexualized high schoolers? Unthinkable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna pull up the front page of the Shonen Jump website. Oh no!
Wait, what's on the front page of the Shonen Jump website?
I don't know, actually. Hang on, what is on the front page right now?
Okay, it's me and Roboco.
Okay, it's My Hero Academia.
Oh, you got My Hero. Okay.
But yeah, this didn't seem to be the case for Sakura, who seems to, as you said, have another series on his resume, some of which were running concurrently with Bakuman and Death Note, so my theory is probably buzz, but anyway.
Yeah, he's mainly known for novels, and he has like a nickname, something like the Foreshadowing Sniper, according to the Sho-ha Shoten wiki, something like that. But yeah, Foreshadowing Sniper, due to his ability to write hints or plots that will be important or developed in the future.
This would make sense. I'm going to talk about it later.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. Azamichi, a boy in his first year of high school, he's secretly like a joke machine. He submits lots of joke prompts to a TV show under the pseudonym Everyday Shijimi, and a classmate named Tayo, who is formerly a child actor, absolutely loves comedy and ropes him into being a duo of manzai stand-up comedy through a wacky scheme where he kind of manipulates him and hires some dudes to pretend to be arseholes about him, and yeah, it's a whole thing. Manzai being a form of comedy rooted in over-the-top reaction, usually split between two roles: the bokeh, who just exposits or says something like a story, a monologue, might ask some questions, while the tsukomi will react to what the bokeh is saying in a humorous, often exaggerated manner.
Oh, I had those swapped in. When you asked earlier about me being a bokeh versus... For some reason, I had them switched to my head.
I feel like I'm going to have a chance to explore the fandom misconceptions about the difference between the straight man and wise guy and bokeh and tsukomi routines.
I mean, this series does that quite a bit anyway. I'm no expert on manzai, or really stand-up in general. I feel like most of my family watch a lot more of it than I do. But I've observed it in a lot of Japanese media. You know, that's that very common trope of the over-the-top anime reaction, sometimes at the reactor's expense, sometimes at the expense of who they're reacting to. You've got Shonen Jump regular Kenta Shinohara, who's clearly a massive fan. Skep Dance delves into the trope a lot. A lot of the gags explore the fact that one of the characters, Himeko, is a tsukomi and is always reacting to stuff. Witch Watch does a very similar thing with its gags.
I think the main difference between the straight man role and the tsukomi is that the tsukomi reacts in an over-the-top way, but is still supposed to be like the normal person in that relationship. Whereas in a straight man and wise guy dynamic, you would expect this to be reversed.
Yeah.
The most often localized as each other as shorthand, but they're not exact equivalents. And I think the distinction is pretty useful in talking about comedy and how it works with different audiences. And like, this is the whole premise of Sho-ha Shoten.
Yes.
So I wanted to take a bit. At this point, I think I'm going to sneak a mini video essay in this podcast about how this works.
But yeah, the story follows the trials of this duo as they try to make their mark on the world of comedy and the various high school level manzai contests they enter together. Obviously, as you said earlier, it's kind of first and foremost a contest manga. And I think the series I found myself drawing comparison to are Akane Banashi and Food Wars, in terms of it being a contest with a panel of judges and the high energy visualizations of the characters' given skills.
Yeah.
Then obviously, very similar to Bakuman, you have an outgoing blonde kid who ropes a more socially reserved dark-haired boy with a lot of untapped potential into being like an entertainment duo, and it focuses on them and all their rivals honing their craft. My dog wants to get out of the room. The dark-haired boy has like an emotional stake with a similarly dark-haired potential love interest with how his entertainment goes. Okay, Woody, I'll let you out of the hideaway. 1 second.
So, Henry, I'm just going to ask you in the meantime, is this your first time reading a sports manga?
So, in a more formal sense, yes. Most of my manga experience has been more or less kind of on the slightly more basic end of reading things like Pokemon Adventures. But yeah, I've only really experienced sports anime from a more passive perspective of I've certainly read a lot of the reactions and I know how much people really, really care about this kind of stuff. But compared to sports film, it does follow a lot of the same kind of principles. Yeah, this is my first time reading a sports manga, but it honestly doesn't feel as different from some of the sports-related media that I've consumed as an American, because there's a lot of advantages to creating a story that is based within a sport of any kind. If the rules are established, that's already a very efficient means of storytelling, because you can already have the stakes clearly established of, oh, are they going to win or lose? You are able to reinforce characterization easily because, again, the positions and the roles given within a team or a contest allow people to be able to more easily define themselves. They're easy adversaries. It's a great formula, and there's a reason why people have done a lot of great storytelling with it. I think as someone reading this kind of a sports manga, it follows a lot of the same kind of basic principles to other shonen anime that I've read, where it's mostly focused on this element of competitiveness. You usually have a character who they're pursuing this goal usually because there is some kind of internal conflict that causes you to... I mean, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Azamichi has a very specific reason for why he wants to pursue comedy and stuff for some very dramatic reasons.
Yeah, also the bonds between the manzai duo are a huge component of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the backstories for how each of them formed the teams they did.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a very competent, non-traditional sports manga. While the comedy doesn't always land, I think the humor in this manga stems from everything around the performed comedy rather than the manzai sketches themselves specifically. Although some of the sketches really got me. So it manages to get you invested in the mechanics and rules of comedy. And like, even if it sounds a bit clinical and sterile, it's generally fascinating to just consider how jokes can build on top of each other and how different gags can work differently depending on who's in the audience, how long they've been entertained. For example, a lot of emphasis is put on how in a competition, if you go first, you don't stand a chance of winning because the audience is not sufficiently warmed up yet. And this brings an element of strategy to the series that I always find fascinating in the same vein as I do in World Trigger and in Pokemon Adventures. I'm a real sucker for things like that.
Yeah. This might be in the runnings for one of my favourite things that Obata's worked on. Possibly could end up being my favourite, because it lacks a lot of Bakuman's more toxic elements of that whole thing of pedestalizing overwork, the sexism and the chauvinism, the overly dense pace and composition at times.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe this isn't Obata because this manga is too nice to women.
Oh boy, the ladies. Oh, the ladies in this.
Yeah, and it shifts from shorter contests and events that gradually introduce this wider cast of rival manzai duos to this big ongoing contest arc that's, as of the time of recording, is still ongoing. The Warako? I don't know how you say it. The wiki is Wara 1 is how it's spelt out. Koshien arc, with the top high schoolers from across the nation.
Yes, for manzai specifically. There is another contest that's for sketch comedy. I guess that's a little different.
Yes, that's at the very start.
Yeah.
Basically, there is some common ground between Tsukumi and a straight man. And mostly I find the straight man as a term, I find it incredibly frustrating because I'm a bisexual trans woman. So when I say that I'm the straight man in the dynamic of Duckface Diaries or something, it's... I always get the one joke. They only have one joke in response. So they both represent the point of view of the normal person, serving as an avatar to the audience. The difference is that most often it's the straight man who does the setup and the wise guy does the punchline.
Yeah.
While in a manzai routine, it's the opposite. The silly blockhead does the setup, presenting a silly situation or some misconceptions, and then the Tsukumi reacts in an over-the-top way, delivering the punchline. Incidentally, I've seen Tsukumi as a verb, localized as not playing the straight man, but rather delivering verbal smackdown, which I feel like is pretty descriptive. And other ways to describe it I've seen were roasting and delivering a rant, which I've not found as appropriate, but can work in very specific contexts from what I gather. And the difference lies in personality types as well. A straight man is typically played as calm and maybe a bit worried and confused. Think like Ian Chesterton in the Doctor Who first movie with Peter Cushing, or like Brian from Life of Brian. So yeah, generally needs to be played as comparatively boring for the over-the-top, larger-than-life characters, the wise guys, and their comedy to be heightened.
Yeah.
And Tsugami is more of a reactive character that can lean into more of a personality, more of a snarky or angry delivery, thus allowing the bokeh to be more of a calm, silly little guy who lives in their own little world, for example. And there's like plenty of character dynamics that work like that in a Western comedy too, so it's not purely a geographical divide.
Oh, absolutely not, yeah.
For instance, take a little Britcom called Faulty Towers, where the main character, Basil, is not a normal person by any means, right? He's a sexually frustrated, neurotic, dysfunctional, snobbish hotel owner that frequently abuses his workers and guests alike, and yet he plays the Tsukami to Manuel, the Spanish waiter, played by the late Andrew Sachs.
For a second there, I was very worried you were going to say Little Britain.
What?
You said when he said the Little Britcom, I was like, is she going to invoke Little Britain?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, no.
Oh, God, I have watched that. But yeah, meanwhile, Polly, the waitress, serves as more of a typical straight man for Basil to deliver snarky punchlines as the wise guy. So he kind of like serves both roles in different contexts. And another character, I guess, I'm going for far too long about this. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I actually have some thoughts on this kind of dynamic as well.
I'm so passionate about this. Another character I've seen a lot of misconceptions about is Roronoa Zoro from One Piece. He's known as one of the more serious characters of the main cast. He doesn't have as much of the over-the-top reactions to the world around him. He's often nonplussed by the strangest things occurring around the crew, especially later on in the series. Earlier on, he was a little different. But he is absolutely the most bokeh character in the Straw Hats, second only to Luffy. Him treating everything so seriously isn't meant to heighten the absurdity of the world around, and it is part of the absurdity. But he is often like read as the straight man of the crew, and that may be due to the differences in audience expectations, because after all, is showing your extreme emotions and vulnerability and things like that normal? And in the world of One Piece, it definitely is, but different audiences experience it and interpret this in different ways. Anyway.
He's one of the few One Piece characters that your One Piece hating or agnostic friends will be like, that one's cool.
Yeah.
For perhaps the wrong reasons. But anyway.
But yeah, Wensleydale, I think you do hit on an important aspect of this sort of stock character that is found within, so to speak, the straight man when it comes to the Tsukomi. This dynamic takes its basis within vaudeville acts, where it was usually the straight man historically was someone that was acting as a foil for the funny man, the comedic character. And being an effective straight man, just to use the parlance of it, way less common. And as a result, they were the ones that tended to get paid more. If you think about Abbott in Abbott and Costello, or Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, those are some of the big ones. Or to go from the real basic ones, our modern biggest equivalent would be someone like Jim from The Office, to evoke that kind of stuff. But it is an interesting point you brought up when it came to One Piece, because yeah, people tend to think that a straight man is meant to be serious, but from a storytelling standpoint, the straight man is primarily there to act as a source of contrast, a foil to the comedic character in order to heighten. And I don't think that's the role he plays in One Piece with that. Of the Straw Hats, who is the one that provides the most kind of contrast to?
Definitely Usopp. There is an actual list of how many times a character has delivered a verbal smackdown in the series, and Usopp has twice as any of the other characters combined.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the ones that are focused on correcting and stuff like that. In preparation for this, again, because I'm someone that has less experience on the manga side of things, I dived into actually looking into traditional manzai performances within Japan, just to see what we're looking at. And as an art form, compared to Western stand-up comedy, where it's usually very focused on single person, punchline setup, big reaction kind of stuff, you don't tend to see the sort of same comedic duos as much in a lot of American or British comedy compared to Japan. And That's a very interesting distinction, that this manga does explore a lot of interesting things that can come out of this scene. Did either of you look into much about the manzai scene outside of the manga for this?
Not as much as I should have.
Well, that's fine, because when we get to some of the sections, I can share some observations, because manzai is very, very heavily determined by vocal delivery. It's, in its closest equivalent, vaudeville theater of the olden days is one of the earlier equivalents, where it's so focused on very quick-timed performance, very rapid-fire kind of wit and response. The amount of wordplay that tends to go into a number of these sketches, but also the melodramatic kind of reaction stuff, ends up being an interesting thing that, like I said earlier, you don't really see as much in a lot of Western stand-up comedy. Mostly because we don't really have comedic duos like we used to over here. I'm trying to think of the biggest duo stand-up comedians, and I think the closest I'm thinking about is like Kate Micucci and Garfunkel and Oates. Oh my gosh, who's the other girl in Garfunkel and Oates? Riki Lindhome. That's like the main group that's coming to mind for me. And I can't really think of many other modern stand-up duo comedians.
I suppose it's a dying art form, but it has survived in the classic comedy duos that exist in modern sitcoms and stuff like that.
Well, I feel like you get that dynamic in places, but the podcast has been where most of this has been migrating to, because the specific dynamic where anyone out there in podcast land who listen to enough podcasts, there's usually a thing where you have the straight man podcast host who usually has the information, has the show note kind of thing, and then you have the bokeh type character who's a little bit more, oh, I'm here to do the jokes and react to the thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The podcast that we found each other from with Hovin, Wiki Manga Recap, has our friends Quinn and Nick, who basically fulfilled that dynamic perfectly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think like this series, it showcases a great variety of different type of acts. Not every duo is dumb, silly bokeh and witty, wise guy Tsukomi.
No, Tsukomi is the straight man, wise guy is the bokeh. That's the point, sorry.
I was trying not to say straight man because of what you said earlier.
I will say, straight man, etymologically, doesn't actually historically have anything to do with sexuality in terms of that. I've been trying to look into, like, why is it called the straight man?
I mean, it's like straight is normal on the straight and narrow, and queer is weird.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. It does have those connotations with that.
Yeah. It's also interesting that One Way Ticket to the Top, the main duo, they got into the sketch comedy competition early on, and then going into the next contest after that, the series bigs up this straight out manzai will be a new challenge for them, but kind of the line between what can count as stand-up and comedy sketch seems a little bit blurry. A lot of the time, the manzai routine will kind of loop back around to being a bit skit-based in a given act.
Oh, yeah. In America, there are like improv teams and like certain improv competitions we have, but I don't know if they work in a similar way. I feel like American improv is definitely way more sketch-based and
stuff like Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, Saturday Night Live stuff, or stuff like formerly College Humor, now Dropout, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Which this manga kind of gets into that a little bit, like in chapter 4, with some of the costumes with the hippo stuff and the horse stuff.
Oh my god, the first comedy event is fantastic. You've got a really good sense of One Way Ticket's underdog status, but also the potential as like scramble to make up a skit in 30 minutes. And it's actually a physical comedy, but that translates really well.
Yes, it's this whole thing where this guy is constantly being bitten by the various animals he encounters, and the comedy comes from how they keep repeating the joke, but then sometimes they'll throw you off, but then repeat the joke anyway, of him being bitten by these animals.
Yes, and it's also a good opportunity to introduce two rival groups in really different ways.
Yeah, there's a very relaxed pace to the whole thing in a lot of manners. I'm obviously more used to weekly manga. I've read some monthly stuff, but it's interesting to see how the story is able to breathe with more spaced out cliffhangers. As the series goes on, you go into these flashbacks with each of the duo, and the flashback will often go on for more than a chapter, and it's, a good half a volume or something.
I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about the characters, but I do appreciate something in terms of the art that I think that Obata does very well, is that in all the projects that he is signed on to, A lot of them are centered on being able to communicate this sort of internal mindset, because you saw this in Death Note, you saw this in
Pokemon?
Thank you. But it's very centered where you have to see these characters thinking like, oh, okay, what's my next move? Okay, I need to figure out these are the next couple of moves I gotta do. That's something you do see very interestingly shown of this is their next move. It could be so easy for it to just be two people just kind of like sitting in a room and all that stuff. But there are some of these panel layouts where the faces get so exaggerated, they really heighten that tension, and it gets into a lot of very fun places.
Yeah, the art is like very signature Takeshi Obata in a way. Like just like in Pokemon, the art style starts out more detailed and crisp, and then evolves in a more like relaxed, round style that's more sustainable for a serialization.
I guess if we're jumping to art, I went back through, I skimmed through some Bakuman chapters. I think the art style shift is even more pronounced here. I think it becomes something very, very distinctive from Obata's other manga. The characters have less defined shape to their expressions, they're a lot more rubber-hosed and simplified, even compared to late Bakuman, whereas at the start they're very precisely drawn with quite thick outlines.
In comparison to the first chapters, around the chapter 10 mark, everything becomes a little less detailed. I have noticed this difference specifically in Nazutani, who is definitely a lot more blobby.
Later on he looks like a human sans Undertale.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Nazutani is actually a very good design, I feel like. It's rare when an artist can draw a stereotypical fat character who eats archetype, but Obata still manages to like make him look very distinct. Like the combo of the bowl cut, the bags under his eyes, and the constant smirk make me think he's low-key got a potential to become a Tumblr sexy man if this gets an anime.
Get dunked on. Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the way the art styles shift. I think it not only obviously makes it more sustainable for serialization, but it fits the quick-fire, high energy of the manzai and the various reactions much better than something a bit more contained and more precise.
One of my standout panels is from the early part of the manga, though. It's the panel of Azamichi's family, the Shijima family, sitting with blank expressions menacingly when Hayo and Azamichi need to perform a contest for them, and they've got this whole aura springing from them in the background. It's very funny.
It's basically this whole thing where it's like, we need to get my parents on board with me trying to commit to comedy because they have set expectations, and it's like, oh, you need to make the whole family laugh, and it's like, oh no, the family are really fussy about what comedy they like. How are we gonna do it?
Also, the fact that they're doing it through, like, whistles, where they have whistles in their mouth in order to show that they're laughing as a little thing. The way that their faces just contort as they're trying to endure the torture of like, no, I must keep my stoic face. No. I can't. They defeated me with their laughter. I believe there was even a panel where a metaphorical spear shoots out and pierces the dad's heart.
Yes. No, it's so funny. Obata has so much range as an artist, and there are lots of great designs here, but I can always recognize his character designs by those signature smooth chins all the conventionally attractive characters have. Just like really, really round and smooth.
Yeah. And it's like the composition is just generally very strong. This is a very experienced mangaka. It's quite easy on the eyes. It doesn't have the Bakuman problem where I feel like they try and jam too many long, crowded speech bubbles into one page. I guess crowded speech, but just it's a very densely text-heavy series, which I guess comes with the territory of being about describing a creative process, but it was nice to have one here where everything was allowed to sink in a bit better.
Yeah, with more pages and stuff, and maybe with a different writer, but maybe the same writer. Let's keep this in mind.
Oh, God. The truth is out there. The signs. The signs.
What are your other favorite standout panels?
I love the audience reaction to the trio manzai group. Mega Beef Bowl XL's pyramid bit, where they all stand in a human pyramid. Pyramid. And
the human period.
That would be an interesting thing to visualize. And it's just all of the color tone outside of the outline drains out of them, and the outlines are emphasized even more. There's kind of a double outline effect on them just to emphasize how baffled all of the onlookers are at this. They all mark the frame. It's a really good comedy reaction panel. It got a good laugh out of me. And kind of ties into what you said about oftentimes the comedy derives from how people react to the jokes rather than the jokes being delivered themselves.
Because I feel like if they were to do it like that, it probably would have been tough. I mean, because humor is very subjective, and a lot of these jokes that they do, like, there are definitely a lot of funny moments in some of the jokes and stuff, but I feel like they would have been setting themselves up for failure if they were intentionally shooting for making sure that it's as funny as possible in the actual bits. Especially since you would have to try and figure out how to show that they're getting better as time goes on.
I think we can move on to the characters, I guess that this will be a spoilery part.
Yeah, spoilery part.
Spoilers ahoy. Do not proceed beyond this point if you want to avoid spoilers. I feel like Hovin is definitely the bouquet to my Sokomi.
I guess the most recent arc has been very interestingly structured with the Wara 1 Koshien stuff, because it's weaving all of the plot threads of this big ensemble set up throughout each of the performances. And just as one duo moves into the spotlight, another might start getting foreshadowed. You have these plot lines of, like, who gets to sit in the chair, and the personal backstory stuff, like the relationship between Tayo and Nazutani.
Oh my god. It gets into some surprisingly dark places with some of the... Oh gosh. Kunaki. Yeah, that one was like, oh my god. Seeing Kunaki and Saku and all of that stuff, it was just like, oh my god. What? Why did they...
He got ligma. Sorry, he got ligma. He couldn't survive.
Yes, and there's a lot of reveals about how Nazutani actually feels about this. It slowly get foreshadowed, and not to mention how Tayo processes all this. At first it seems to be very antagonistic towards Nazutani, but actually later on we learn that Nazutani was a big inspiration towards Tayo getting into comedy just as much as Kunigi was. And showed him lots of comedy DVDs.
Yeah, Nazutani's story didn't particularly pull on my heartstrings, but I can very much see how it would for someone else. It's really nice to have some heels who end up having a face turn anyway, so as not to take attention away from passionate Sandbag, who I suppose we're probably going to talk about a little more later.
It just occurs to me, I was trying to think about what this manga most reminded me of in terms of its storytelling, because yes, this is a sports manga kind of thing, but given the kind of tactics and the sort of storytelling that comes with comedy, this is like a professional wrestling manga. Because to give a little bit of my own background, I know, yes, we see a lot of the performance stuff, but anyone who's also familiar enough with professional wrestling knows that navigating the business and politics side of things ends up being equally, if not a bigger part of actually successfully going through the business stuff. And that's an element that Sho-ha does that I feel that we don't see as much in other sports mangas, at least from what I've passively observed. Both of y'all are welcome to correct me.
I think you'd maybe enjoy iShield 21. Sorry for interrupting, but yeah, that's a recommendation that maybe I would give.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of weaving of out-of-match stakes and inter-character stuff, and then there's a lot of schemes of the team quarterback in terms of trying to get what the team wants and extorting various characters to do it.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of pulling on the heartstrings with some of the older characters.
Oh, that's about it in terms of my general thoughts, so...
Shall we discuss Azamichi as the main character?
Yeah, so he's the Tsukomi of this duo, and he's great at coming up with material, but he doesn't have much stage presence or experience.
Yes.
So, obviously he has emotional stakes too, which the manga is getting to in the more recent chapters of the time of recording, but he's mainly wrestling more with improving his actual skill. Whereas, on the flip side, you have Tayo, who is the bouquet of the duo, who is a very natural performer from his days as a child actor, but he has a lot of baggage with both his mum, who is very neglectful, doesn't really know how to interact with him, and his former would-be partner, Kunugi. And I think he wrestles a lot more with the emotional stakes. His skills are up to par, but it's kind of clearing up his emotional baggage that is his arc over the course of the series thus far.
Yeah, I think centering the series around a very analytical character was very much the right way, if not the only way for this to work as a comedy sports manga. I think One Way Ticket to the Top complement each other rather well in introducing the mechanics of comedy to each other, as both of them are defined by their weaknesses. So like if Taina doesn't know how to write, Asamichi doesn't know how to perform, and that way we can learn the mechanics of comedy alongside them, like in chapter 2 where they talk about range.
And yeah, their routine is a very strong gimmick for a protagonist of a manga, where they are very flexible. They can come up with a lot of different routines for a lot of different scenarios, which is something that then translates into they can do a lot of different things based on the challenges they come up against, and they are the characters we're following, so that's a helpful thing to have in your protagonists in your contest manga. Whereas for their rivals, you may or may not see them again after the given competition, so it kind of makes sense for the rivals to maybe have a slightly more fixed thing that they go for.
I love how One Way Ticket always has a way to up the stakes and pull a big twist during every event, but the first few are like, oh dear, we're not prepared, we need to come up with something on the fly. Then, oh yeah, they prepare and memorize 16 separate routines, which nobody fucking does.
Oh my... Yeah, that... Ugh. It's a kind of commitment to a craft that I feel like you said with detail, I have a hard time imagining how else you would go about depicting that style of comedy and that sort of dedication that is present there.
Mm-hmm. It's really funny also, I guess this is just a short note, the first time Tayo and Asamichi meet each other, they are already playing the Tsukami and Boko routine. Even in his thoughts, like Asamichi is doing so when Tayo's trying on his weird costume. They don't even meet and they're already doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a recurring thing throughout the series where oftentimes the manzai routine is very baked into just the natural chemistry the duos have with each other. And a lot of their just everyday conversations end up coming off like a manzai routine.
Definitely. Oh, I forgot to mention one little interesting thing I noticed with Tayo. This is kind of like a little art observation, but in one of Tayo's flashbacks where they're talking about him auditioning, correct me if I'm wrong, did y'all get Magical Girl vibes off of, there's like a little thing where he's like all sparkling and he's like transforming into the actor, and that is such an interesting choice in terms of that. I mean, it's kind of like a thing of, oh, he's transforming into the person that his mom wants him to be, but oh, to no avail.
I guess I don't know if it's a specific reference. I guess maybe I've seen a lot of panels like that when it comes to graceful characters like Tayo.
I think another thing that really stood out to me with Tayo is in his flashback, you see it's clear that he never really cared that much about acting as a craft. He was doing it to try and make his mother smile and I think in some level stop his parents from divorcing.
Yeah. Oof.
And then obviously that did not pan out. And then he finds it fairly flippant to just drop acting. It's not something that's a big deal to him. But then when he gains an appreciation for comedy, when him and Asamichi finally lose their first contest, suddenly he's crying about it. It's something that really hits him hard because he's never actually cared about the entertainment medium he's engaged in performance the way he has with this comedy duo. So that was a really good scene with him.
I wanted to talk a bit about this and about like the stakes in chapter 2, because obviously you've talked about how Asamichi has to make his family laugh, and there is a panel, and it comes up later, where Tayo says, well, nothing's easier than making your family laugh. And this is fantastic setup for later, since we know he couldn't make his mum laugh, so it just kept me wondering why he said that. And oh, that's what Kunigi told him. Fuck, okay, this hits me now. I can see why Asakura is apparently the king of foreshadowing or whatever.
Yes. And obviously with Asamichi's arc, we've not seen quite as much payoff because, his motivation for getting into comedy is that a childhood friend of his in middle school is like, we're parting forever, can you say something to make me smile? Then he can't think of a joke, and then she disappears and changes her name. And so he's like, I want to reach out to that person, which I don't find the most relatable or interesting as a motivation. Kind of like in Bakuman, his is the less interesting thing he's working towards, but we'll see how it pans out over the next few chapters, I guess, with that childhood friend character being reintroduced.
See, Mizuha is one of the reasons why I was sure that, okay, this is definitely Tsugumi Oba under a different pseudonym. It was like that Mizuha is just the same blank slate love interest as Azuki from Bakuman. I mean, if it's not over, then Obata must have a lot of influence over that.
Which is annoying, because Hanamori, their manager, is right there. So I think she's from the student council.
She is.
She notices Tayo noticing Asamichi being roped into things by Tayo early on. And there's a chapter where she's like, she maybe has a crush on Asamichi. You could read that chapter as her realizing, oh, actually, I'm just a fan of their comedy, but that could also just be a rationalization, and it could be something that pops up later, but...
Yeah, ship is gonna ship, obviously. I love Hanamori. She makes great faces, and it's cool that we have the bait and switch of her doing that. But then it turns out that she fulfills more of a mentor/teacher role to One Way Ticket to the Top. So even if it's just rationalization, it's not like it's her only role just to be a love interest or anything like that.
She's a big fan of comedy, so she's able to give them advice from that perspective of an audience member.
I guess one thing that I was disappointed in when it comes to Tayo is how little of a chance to shine he gets in the actual performance prep, since all the analysis is done by Azamichi, so his role in these interactions is limited to just saying, wow, really, Azamichi? Is that true? I don't really understand it, but you're smart, so it must be true. And he gets a chance to shine at the beginning, where we see the power of his performance, and it picks up a little in the preliminaries, where the pro-comedian has this monologue about how great he is at managing himself and his partner on stage, and he helps Azamichi when he forgets his line. But even in his backstory, it kind of seemed to me like Nazatani and Kanugi are bigger main characters than he was in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the emphasis was more on them. I guess we've covered Brutus quite a lot already. It's interesting that you have an unlikable bokeh as the gimmick. I assumed going in, oh, Nazatane's obviously going to be the Tsukomi because he's so snarky and rude, but it wasn't that.
He is like the most wise guy, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
like he's the bokeh that's good at delivering the snarky line. So he's kind of like the Cartman archetype.
Oh.
Yeah, the plot kind of goes back and forth on, where is the root of his antagonism? Is he actually as mean and heartless as he seems? And obviously later on, it turns out no, he carries a lot of guilt over what happened, but he just kind of suppresses that and plays into his routine, and he's trying to fulfill Kunugi's wish, taking his comedy forward and running with it.
I don't know what your guys' favorite teams were outside of Rise to the Top, but for me, I'm a broken glass slipper stan over here.
Heck yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
they rule.
Yeah, okay. Are we all in agreement? Best team?
The best team, best routine, absolutely.
Really, my favourite flashback, I think.
Fucking amazing. Yes. I was very afraid of how the authors would handle them, given how everything Tsukumiya touches has a very sexy stink on it.
Yes, they're both girls. There's, Iwa Shizumi, who is literally Brie.
Akinari Sakura is a psyche because he has basically written me, holy shit, Rinka is just me for real. And they have the best routine out of everyone in the tournament. Like the situational comedy translated so well into English, and the callbacks to earlier jokes were extremely funny. I mean, fucking Oratorio Tanaka. It's the only routine where I've laughed out loud on a second reread. It's so good.
Yes, and then, obviously the bokeh is Sayada, who's just a small, silly girl.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is Iwashi Mizu reacting in a very snarky way to her silly things. But the backstory is very endearing, where it seems like they just have that dynamic, and Sayada is just an annoyance to her. But then the teacher starts chewing out Sayada for being a bad influence, and Iwashi Mizu gets very defensive. It's like, no, I like being around Sayada, and I want to pursue comedy with her.
Yeah, there's like a nice friendship between the two of them. And also the fact that they are the first group of women to participate in the War 1 Grand Prix. In my research about the manzai scene, it has been something that has been very heavily male-dominated in terms of the kinds of competitions and the kinds of prize money and stuff that comes out of that. And the other attempts at portraying manzai in media, this is one of the first ones where I've seen where it actually appears to be some attempt to address some of the dynamics within that space. And it's a similar kind of dynamic in comedic spaces in America, where women comedians get way more scrutiny and way less grace compared to some of the other garbage dudes we got in the comedy space right now. So all this to say, we don't know where this thing's going to be ending, but I feel like if they did a thing where it was like Rise to the Top, it ends up them versus Broken Glass Slipper for the tournament, I feel like that's my prediction for the ending matchup, and they would probably make Broken Glass Slipper be the winner. That's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right, but yeah.
There is a really good panel that I'm very fond of. I forget what the bouquet in this pair is called the troll little girl. Sayada, yeah. She asks her if there's any other dream that Rinka would have liked to follow. And she goes, right now, I think I'm on a pretty good track as to what I wanted to do. And there is a panel with the future plan survey that she had to submit in class. And the first choice was someone who does what she thinks is right. And the second choice is someone who can destroy what she doesn't seem right. And I think that's just going to be my philosophy in life from now on.
Aww. Sidebar. Apologies to Stephen Paul, the translator of this series. I've been using Warawon Koshien instead of Grand Prix, not because I haven't been reading your lovely, lovely translations on the Shonen Jump app. It's because I've been using the Sho-ha Shoten wiki as a shorthand to remember things because I am very scatterbrained.
I also love how each of the pairs has their own ritual before starting the manzai, but Broken Glass Slipper has probably the best one with Sayada just slapping the shit out of Rinka. It's so good.
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of the better examples of the physical comedy. One where I wasn't a big fan of the physical comedy routine was Kirameki Confections. This was weird. I didn't like this. The baby-faced bodybuilder frightens me, and I don't like it when he gets hit.
The baby-faced bodybuilder isn't real. He can't hurt you.
The babyface bodybuilder. It's interesting because it's like they're kind of like the inverse of Mega Beef Bowl XL in that they're a goofy and unorthodox act with a lot of physicality.
Yeah.
But their whole thing is that they make it really hard for following acts to do anything, whereas Mega Beef Bowl are kind of a palate cleanser. They're kind of an in-between of like, okay, this clears the board a bit, gives the next act less heat from one of the really, really big, wow, showy off, this is redefining manzai acts that comprise a lot of the rivals.
I love how Kirameki Confections have like the tragic backstory of like, we'll win Warakoshian so that our friend will have surgery. Our friend Steven Universe, that is. And then Steven has surgery anyway, because of course he fucking would.
That was a really funny detail of like, the backstory was solved.
The other team, Kamikaze Yellowtail. I don't know why, but looking at Kosuke Kamayami, those eyes.
Oh yeah, the Buddha guy, right?
Stare into my soul. I am quite perplexed. I guess it's a good sign that there are some of these side characters that only show up for certain single chapters. Maybe we'll see more of them in future chapters, but I'm just looking at these two and I'm like, what's their story? What's going on there? There's a lot going on under the surface there.
Yeah, there's opportunities there. I think they're also first years or maybe second years. So if the series maybe goes on for like another arc next year, if Ticket loses and then they have to build themselves back up, maybe we'll see them again. Do you want to talk about the German team?
Sprechchor. Yes, they're the longest running rivals to One Way Ticket.
Yeah.
For across the series. They're introduced in that first sketch comedy competition. Very homoerotic vibes here.
Best couple.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that and not me.
They probably have the least funny bits in their actual sketches, but the characters that one can easily connect to due to their exposure, like both in the universe and for the actual reader.
Yeah. I don't really love Onizaki's facial expressions as a comedic bit, but yeah, a lot of factors mitigate it. It's the creative way that our routines are used, they're the kind of a strong emotional center, and they're used in the narrative very well. And yeah, you have the Tsukomi, whose whole thing is, I'm just a dick. I look like a dick and I am one, whereas Onizaki looks like a thug, but is actually very sweet, and there's double meanings to everything he says. Every intimidating thing he says is actually thinking something very well-meaning.
Yes, and they actually have one of the first examples of how, the dynamic can be easily switched because the two are just speaking as themselves and thus can more easily assume the Tsukami and Bokeh roles more easily, I suppose.
They have their backstory of how Mizushina worked out that Onizaki could really get into comedy, but he's stuck in the baseball club who just walk right over him, really manipulate how well-meaning he is, and then Mizushina hatches this plot where he challenges them to a fight, but then is secretly filming the fight. So he basically blackmails them with the footage of, you're just beating this kid up, because he's not a physically well-built guy.
I can confirm now, looking through Tumblr, the amount of homoerotic fan art that people have made for Sprechchor.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
There's quite a bit.
Yeah, the demand is there. The demand is there.
The bit about breaking Onizaki's elbow so he doesn't have to play baseball really got me. That's heartwarming as fuck.
Now, it's interesting you kind of mentioned the fandom stuff, because obviously I don't keep up with that. And then, Henry, earlier you called it relatively niche, which in many ways it is. The wiki is not very extensive. Sprechchor, despite being, that's not how it's pronounced, I know, one of the primary rivals, barely have anything in their entry, but a bunch of the other ones have really detailed ones. Yeah, Shiba Inu World Tour have loads, so it's really inconsistent. But yeah, obviously I think it's a manga without an anime yet, and that's a big factor. I think once an anime comes in, that tends to draw in a lot of fans.
Yeah.
That is true.
One thing about Sprechchor, I can't really see them as serious threats whenever they reintroduce them into the tournaments. Like, they're good additions to have and stand out from the crowd. And, like, I get what they're going for in that, oh, we've been everywhere. We have so much experience. But still, whenever they say, yes, Sprechchor are one of the top threats, I can't take this seriously. Why did they have to lose in the preliminaries? You could have had Ticket as the wild card instead of them. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing I quite like about that ebb and flow of who's in the lead of the Grand Prix arc, of Broken Glass Slipper snatching a high bar earlier on, so we get a lot of interim acts that fall short, it's like which one's going to finally get them, and then Sprechchor finally get their big W moment where they eventually swipe it, and it feels big because you've had all of those acts in the middle. So yeah, although you know the new rivals rising who already beat them once are going to snatch out again and establish the higher competition, it's nicely positioned to be a satisfying payoff for them as far as a narrative beat goes.
Yeah.
Speaking of, shall we talk about Rising?
Yeah. So they are a really good element of surprise in the sketch comedy tournament. They bring a nice element of rivalry among all these teams who play relatively nice with each other. And then these two stinkers who actually compete with each other to see who's the funniest and have a double bokeh routine.
Yes, and then the backstory of it is that Atsushi had this whole thing where at school he was doing comedy contests with other schoolmates, but then no one got the jokes that Bunta was doing except him, and that really got on his nerves, and eventually he just sees Bunta as more of a rival than any of them, so he ends up forming a comedy duo with him.
I mean, if you need to remember them, Bunta is the one that looks like an extra from Fire Emblem, and Atsushi looks like an extra from Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah,
Nice.
precisely.
Yeah, Atsushi is about to challenge me with his bug-themed deck, and has some really strong opinions about trap cards.
Yeah, so we mentioned Passionate Sandbag, the ones to beat. They're bigged up as the biggest rivals. You have the shit-heel Akanda, who's... I think this series really agrees with me on mean-spirited bully comedians who are always, like... Their whole humour derives around putting people down, like, fucking Jimmy Carr is the example that comes to mind.
I was thinking exactly that.
Yeah, like that kind of roast comedy. It's a thing where I do think about how I could see someone wanting to take this premise and turning it into an American story. I could see them transferring this into the world of American stand-up comedy, because you do see similar dynamics of comedians that are focused on, like, oh, just roast comedy stuff, other people doing more physical humor, or people doing more of a deadpan kind of thing. And Passionate, their whole thing, they look like they're about to drop some killer digs at the Sailor Scouts, talking about how you're too late. Once the Heart of Darkness passes, I shall have all the crystal hearts. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Like, I'm surprised we haven't gotten a snooty anime girl laugh out of one of them yet.
But, like, one of them's just a mystery ditz pretty boy, Ataru.
Yeah, that's true.
Apparently he's the one who writes most of the material, so that's interesting, I guess.
I'm very interested to know how the next few chapters are going to flesh him out, because he seems to have gotten less of a showcase, and seems to find something interesting about One Way Ticket to the Top's routine. All of the stuff talking about what's going to happen next is going to age poorly over the next few months after this podcast comes out.
After it comes out? Hoo boy. Tell that to the listeners who are up to date as of the time of the podcast dropping. It's highly likely that a lot of the speculation and plot theories you all are raising have already been answered in the manga by this point. silly Hovin new slow editor.
So yeah, I think they are amazing heels. I think it's so easy to make the concept of evil comedian into an absolutely stupid character. There was an evil manga creator in Bakuman, and that was really dumb.
Oh god. That arc wasn't good.
But I thought that they were really well handled here. It's still ambiguous whether the taller one actually has ties to Mizuha in any way, but it's a ball that's up in the air and a nice bit of tension to have.
Yeah, I was under the impression of that it was empty showboating and he was just picking on something, but the guy said, but it keeps you up in the air about that throughout the whole Grand Prix.
Yeah, especially since her first name is really rare, apparently, and she did move to that region. So it's really funny how the comedy world around then is all like, we don't like them because we're virgins and the Chads.
Oh my god.
I think it could easily turn into an insult thing, but I think it doesn't. I think I appreciate the theme built around the comedians find the worst weaknesses and turn them into the greatest strengths with humor, and passionate Sandbag are the perfect antagonist to oppose the main character in that.
I agree. And I think to your point earlier, Hovin, about how they tried to do this kind of evil manga creator in Bakuman, I think this works so much better because we have all experienced people that do use comedy for evil, more or less. And I think there is something that's way more true to life in that kind of stuff.
Ricky Gervais.
Oh, yes. Ricky Gervais.
Glinner.
That is way too generous to Glitter to call him a comedian.
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock a little bit lately. He's been,
Asamichi kind of wants to have it both ways in his showdown with Rising and Sandbag, doesn't he? He says that comedy always hurts someone, but if someone insults people for laughs, don't they deserve to be called a comedian? I feel like this speech could have been handled better, and he kind of needs to pick a lane here.
Maybe it's partially because we're all coming from this outside of the kind of expectations that come with manzai comedy. But I do kind of feel like, so far we haven't really come to a big thesis on what comedy is like, essentially. Compared to, say, other sports manga, I feel like at a certain point you do kind of get things about, like, the core spirit of this sport is this, and the core spirit of this...
Timing!
Oh.
What is the essence of comedy?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's one part of it, but I feel like we haven't seen that kind of thesis yet. Maybe we will as the series comes to a closer of what they consider the most important thing for a comedian to be, but I guess it's not just like one single thing. Obviously.
It's almost like that speech is about punching down, but it doesn't like specifically name it.
Yeah.
The other duo that we've not really touched on that's pretty significant is Shiba Inu World Tour, where you have this great pretty boy design on Mimomi, the bouquet, which ties into the fact that the roles are very unexpected. It's kind of a reversal of Sprechchor. Sprechchor's archetypes with the slender, well-spoken bouquet and the brash, athletic, more masculine Tsukomi.
Yeah.
I liked how they played into the ambiguity of whether Mimomi was a manipulative, nasty character, but that then turns out to be something that is imposed on him by the Tsukomi, who I did not write the name down of in his flashback.
Let me see. It's not in the character list on Mal, surprisingly.
His name is Onozuka.
But yeah, I know what you mean. I must admit the backstory didn't really grab me. I guess I didn't really have the expectations that the twink was supposed to be framed as evil, but suddenly it was part of it. And after Nazatani having a face turn, I was like, wait, what? Are they trying to suddenly build them as heels or something? I don't buy this. I never bought this. So yeah, I guess this one fell a bit flat for me. But I did like the characters apart from that. I think they fit quite neatly into the dynamic.
In terms of predictions on where we want to go, I think if they want to keep it going past this arc, I feel like the typical way to do it would be one-way ticket, take the lead, but then Passionate Sandbag, just swipe it out from under them.
Mm-hmm.
If they really want to kick him down a few pegs, they could have it so that one-way ticket doesn't even get to take the lead. I don't know, they've been beaten by Rising once already. I feel like they're going to want to showcase that they've improved enough that they can take on Rising now. They're up to that standard.
I think that's a fair prediction. I feel like they're going to want to go for one more arc because traditionally in Japan, looking through some of the biggest manzai competitions, it's the M1 Grand Prix. It is a competition. It's been active for like the past couple of years. They did one in 2023. When's the 2024 one supposed to be? But it's a competition that is organized by the Asahi Broadcasting Corporation.
I'm so happy that you've researched that because I was so focused on the series itself that I barely had the time to research anything apart from that.
Yeah, same.
Like I said, I've watched a bit more clips of manzai competition stuff, and the best way I can describe it, and I think this will be a good metric to gauge any potential anime adaptations from, but in the clips that I have seen circulated online, again, each manzai routine is going to be different depending on the pair that you have there, but it's often seems very tailor-focused. It's kind of like a debate team kind of thing where some of it is basically a part of, the subjective humor that is found in it, but also some of it is just the mechanical skill that comes in effectively delivering a routine. And the M1 competition, they go pretty hard in terms of their prizes. It's a 10 million yen prize.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oof.
Which, 65,000 USD, but still, that's a lot. And they get these weird special sponsored prizes that happen. Last year, the unit agency was Reiwa Roman Yoshimoto, and they won a year supply of chicken from Drive-In Tori. They won Japanese headpieces, I guess, 100 set of gold 5-piece series. So a golden hamburg steak, golden shrimp with chili sauce, golden beef curry, golden stewed diced pork, golden beef stew, courtesy of 7-Eleven, and 100-year worth of Donbai cup noodles.
Oh my god.
A lot of food sponsorships with this.
I love that it's 100 years specifically. That kind of seems like, okay, we've definitely got to live for 120 years at least, or it's just going to get wasted and dicey, yeah.
Yeah, so that seems to be the kind of motif of hundreds in a lot of these. Prizes involve giving the champions either 100 units of something or 100 sets of this, or in the case from in 2015 and 2016, giving 100 kilograms of premium fried chicken from Family Mart. But anyway, my prediction would be them to graduate to, if not the actual M1 Grand Prix, something that's more of the equivalent of that.
I hope that they do, because then we can see them compete with Broken Glass Slipper again, and seeing more Broken Glass Slipper is always great. I have one more character note and a few stray observations. So I want to give a special shout out to the Shijima family, who constantly play the bouquet to Azamichi Tsukami. There are really a source of some great comedy in chapter 2. I especially love the dad who keeps giving his son opportunities to explain himself and why he chose this career and how he's serious about this, and each time it seems like he's starting to understand, only for him to say, well, he can't. Again, and be like, okay, so back to these brochures for Tokyo U. So great. And apart from that, I think in chapter 4, I think it was a bit later, it was difficult for me to understand why during like the enrollment forms chapter, they found it so difficult to understand Hanamori's advice to just speak as themselves, to practice not sketch comedy but traditional manzai. But I guess someone gave me this advice as an actor once in the past, to speak more as myself, and I found it impossible to internalize at the time, so maybe it makes sense. And also during the Kirameki Confections performance, I love the two kids who just get separated from the parents and just say, we're totally unrelated children who got separated from our parents and randomly tagged along because it seemed fun. Kids love this kind of stuff. That being us, we are the kids.
Yeah, it was a nice little incidental thing. Gosh, I'm trying to think of like what would be like an absolutely ridiculous wrench in the gears type of addition that they could add at this point. They haven't really done a musical duo yet. That's not as big of a thing in manzai. I feel like that could be something that they might have.
They had the one act where I think it was Taiyo was trying to sing opera the entire time.
Oh, yes. I'm talking more like a Garfunkel and Oates type of musical duo where they just come out and they just sing like a song. Not really a thing in manzai, but I feel like someone could try that. Though, translating actual musical stuff into manga, that does sound like that would get very difficult.
Oh yes, especially if this gets adapted into an anime. I think for my predictions it would mostly be they lose and try out next year, and then maybe they win and we get a time skip for where they actually participate in the pro tournaments and stuff. But yeah, obviously they've got to do the sketch comedy bit as well.
Oh, actually, I do have a new other prediction of potentially Azumichi's side gig of submitting jokes to TV and radio stuff, them potentially getting a writer's gig in this kind of thing. And, it's a question of, do you stick with this team or do you sell out? And I feel like that would be an interesting dynamic to add, especially with Taiyo's baggage when it comes to being a former TV and child actor stuff.
This could be a fun training arc if they take a gap year from this to train up the stuff and, I don't know, maybe try to focus everything and stake everything on the third year of high school.
So yeah, it's a new thing for you Hovin's Hideaway listeners, if there's any of you that haven't been listening to what I've been doing in the interim lately. By the viewing figures, probably not, but yeah, we got some Q&A questions where we reached out on Blue Sky and asked if people had anything they wanted to ask us.
I think people understand what a Q&A is most of the time.
Wait, you're telling me we're gonna A these Qs?
No, this incredibly large audience of exclusively Hovin's Hideaway listeners who have been waiting for 3 years are a bit in the dark about that sort of thing, I think you'll find. So I need to spell that.
Well, listeners, this is gonna take the world by storm, baby. Just the concept of listening to a group and being able to answer those questions, so...
Yeah, hold on to your butts. Anime God King asks, Coke or Pepsi? Honestly, I have no strong preference. Maybe Diet Coke? I try to buy fancy colas when possible, like Karma Cola, which is the brand here, or, like, Curiosity Cola, but those tend to be nicer as sodas on their own, and I often use Coke as the mixer, and fancy colas aren't as good for that stuff, but, you know, you're not having to fund the Coke or PepsiCo, and they're better for you, so...
Yeah, it kind of seems like I've subconsciously structured all my answers as the Ogiri contests that they had with Rising and the Sandbag. So the answer to this one is, both make my teeth go bad. What's the point of choosing between two sugary drinks I don't even like that much? There's no difference.
I gotta concur. Soda's trash. I don't like soda, 'cause carbonation hurts my tongue.
You two are of the same mind.
Yeah. Now, if we're gonna talk teas, we could talk all day, but sodas? Nah.
Earl Grey gang.
Yeah. Chais. Chais all the way.
I thought you said cheese and I got really excited for a second.
I mean, cheese is great also, but a cheese-flavored tea I feel like would, that's just milk.
What is a cheese-flavored tea? I'm sorry, I'm getting to Tsukami.
You're getting Tsukami. Burger or burrito? For me, it's like, the average burrito I've had is better than the average burger I've had, but the best burger I've ever had clears all burritos.
You know, I've never had a roast donkey before, so I gotta go for that one. Donkey.
Okay. To quote the preeminent leftist Caleb Maupin,
Oh no!
Burger King. That's my choice.
We had this amazing chain called Dirty Burger, which did really sloppy but really tasty burgers.
Ooh.
And I think the only one left is now in Chicago or something.
Oh.
And all of the ones in England are gone, and I'm sad. It had one of my favourite burgers ever.
Oh, that's...
I
mean, I am slightly close to Chicago. Do you want me to, like, mail you...
I don't know if it's actually Chicago, but I feel like...
How can you mail a burger? It's gonna go bad!
Mailing a burger is not a good idea.
There are ways... There are things folks have done. I can figure stuff out.
Is a hot dog a taco or a sandwich?
Okay, What's with these fast food questions anyway? Are you an anime king or Burger King? Make up your bloody mind.
I think of it as more of a sandwich. For me, the bread component overrides the shape in my mind.
If we're talking functionality, then it is what you want to ontologically consider a sandwich. If it serves the function of sandwich, it is a sandwich. If it serves the function of a taco, it is a taco.
I think it's a kanapka. And I'm not going to elaborate on that one. Actually, I am going to elaborate on that one. In Poland and, I don't know, maybe countries around Central Europe, but I have no idea. So we mostly do open-faced sandwiches. Obviously, like, we can do two slices and things between them, like when we pack for work or school or stuff. But for regular meals, like breakfast or supper, we usually do, like, one slice and things on top and don't do the other slice as you guys do.
And yeah, both the open top and the closed top are referred to as basically canapes. Kanapka.
Yeah.
So sandwich and canape are the same thing in Polish.
Yeah, well, we've never had an Earl of Sandwich, so that's one thing.
Oh, I guess that is the designation. If it is an item that you can eat with a single hand so that you can play chess against other members of the nobility, then I guess technically sandwich.
Yeah, I guess the closed top, it really is just like, it's good for portability, but yeah, if you're just sitting down and eating something in the house, there's no real reason for the top slice of bread, unless you really, really like bread. And then, anyway, Vespa Music asks, okay, if someone was saying goodbye forever and asked you for a joke to part with a smile, what would you go with?
I have a visual gag because I would post this and I would like you, Henry, to describe what this looks like.
Okay. 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 Listener, I suppose I'll start with there's a 3-dimensional arrow that is rendered heavily JPEG artifacted, pointing outward, and standing atop, there is a male lion who is looking rather emaciated, his tail downward, stepping forward, looking back towards the viewer, mouth agape, and I can't help but notice the presence of his testicles there.
The cat testicles is the thing that ties this manga all together, as we've seen.
Hanamori's cat, yeah.
Especially with the caption that says, defeated male leaves.
Apparently lionesses bite lions in the testicles sometimes, so maybe that's tied specifically to that.
Yeah, when they want to do the do.
Yeah, do the do, yes.
Yeah, they will bite on the balls. It's very much that one meme of, oh, darling, it's time for your ball flattening. Yes, dear.
So yes, if someone was saying goodbye forever to me, I would post this with all the implications that you can interpret.
I would do a really shit pun, because I personally like them a lot, and it would likely disappoint them. I guess the example I'll pull from is, there's a joke by, I believe, Tim Vine. Tim Vine, a comedian that my family have quoted at me a lot, that I've never actually seen myself. So, might be off here. But the joke goes as follows. A guy is driving a car when he gets a phone call from his boss, and he's like, oh my god, you've just been promoted. You're going to be training new trainees. Your pay's gone up. And he's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And he swerves, but like he gets back on track and continues down the road. But then he gets another call from his boss 5 minutes later. It's like, well, you know, we've been looking at your record, and actually, I think you could really move up. I think we can make you the team leader. And he's like so surprised, like, oh my god, that's great. And he swerves again. And then he's about to get to his destination, he's almost there, when suddenly he gets another call from his boss. It's like, you know what, man? Let's just make you the new manager of your branch. I think you are outstandingly good. And at this, he is so surprised and thrilled and confused that he swerves off and crashes the car into a nearby building. A police officer comes and talks to him and is like, oh, whoa, what's all this then? What's going on here? And he says, sorry, officer, I appear to have careered off the road.
Oh, God.
Okay, brilliant. I also was going to take a similar tact, because the person would go up to me being like, oh, please tell me a joke so I can part with a smile. To which I would say, okay, we got one part smile. What do you want in the other part? Do you want one pot beef, one pot pork?
one part lion testicles, I don't know.
Oh my god.
It all comes back to the lion
Yeah,
testicles.
that would be my gambit. Short to the point. Yeah.
Vespa writes, also, this isn't a question, but I'm reading it right now, and it's really good. I wouldn't have even tried if not to look for a question, so, yeah.
Thank you, Vespa.
Hope you enjoyed it.
There you go. I will say, this does seem like a pretty delightful little read. As someone not super familiar with the scene, I think this was an interesting introduction into this kind of stuff. And I will say, as someone who does enjoy me a lot of different kinds of comedy, it was definitely something interesting to behold. Which I guess that's the sort of shonen formula of like, oh, make a manga about a specific field and someone is going to be very interested in that.
Yeah, that's kind of the appeal, because there's so many different mangas. There's way more manga than there are anime, because obviously it's just less staff to do it,
Yeah.
It's easier to put it out quickly, and so they often tend to end up targeting very particular subject matters.
I did look some things up to see, and I did see there was a manga titled The Manzai Comics, also known as The Comedy Team. It was published from 2005 to 2009. It only had 5 volumes, but it was written by Atsuko Asano and illustrated by Hizuru Imai, where it seemed like a very different kind of thing where it was 2 childhood friends who are a misfit student and a very confident student are brought together to form a manzai duo. And then there's also a childhood friend who is a yaoi fan that ships the 2 together. And I don't know if that's any good, but I guess I am curious enough to see how the Manzai Comics compares, because it definitely, just the cover gives early 2000s manga vibes in terms of, like, the aesthetics with this.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So then, a friend of the podcast, Let Me Be, asks, what's your go-to joke in normal life?
Okay, so I've got one. So this is one that I've totally stolen from season 2 of Dice Funk, a D&D comedy podcast that I listen to. Brie looks into the camera like she's in the office.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I think my go-to joke is that someone might apologize and be like, oh, yeah, I already finished this thing, and oh, I'm already done, and I'll just be like, oh, how dare you do this thing well? How dare you be competent at this task, kind of thing. I also do feel like I do some self-deprecating thing where I'll say, I stole this joke from Robert Evans to be like, I did this thing because I'm a hack and a fraud, kind of thing.
Aww.
It's not the most self-deprecating thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I have, like, specific jokes in mind, as opposed to recurring with my answers. So, if it's a short one, my short joke is, a man walks into a bar on the Titanic and orders a drink. The ship then hits at the iceberg, and the man says, I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous.
Oh my god.
And then there's a longer one. I don't know if we... fuck it.
Yeah,
so,
do it.
3 siblings find a magic lamp.
Okay.
Is it Huey, Dewey, and Louie?
Sure, let's say it's them. Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Cool.
And they rub the lamp, and a genie pops out and says, for awakening me from my long slumber, I will grant you each 3 wishes. So, Huey says, I would like to be a millionaire like Uncle Scrooge.
This would be Louie, because Huey is the typical junior woodchuck, and
Oh my god.
Louie is a street kid in the newest...
We're going
anyway,
off
never
of
mind.
comic canon.
Don't worry about it, I've got this covered. Louis then says, oh, I want to be even richer than that. I want to be the richest duck in the world. And then Louis goes... No, sorry. Oh, fuck, he's already thrown me off. I'm just doing them in order of their names. Then Dewey goes, I want it so that one of my wings will rotate around clockwise. And so grants all 3 of them wishes. Dewey's wing arm thing just starts moving around. It doesn't really follow the laws of muscle tendons anymore. It's like a nutcracker or something. It's just moving around like it's on a wheel. And then the genie asks, okay, what's your second wish? Dewey says, I want to have a supermodel duck wife. I want a just super hot wife.
Duck tits. Hoo-hoo.
And the genie grants him the wish. Then Dewey is like, well, asking for one wife is basic stuff. I want to be the most attractive duck in the world so that anyone would fall in love with me.
Okay.
then Dewey asks, I want it so that my other wing arm thing rotates counterclockwise in exactly the same fashion. And so the genie grants the wishes.
Aw.
He's now got both of his arm wings
Oh, classic Dewey.
rotating in opposite ways. It's a very strange and peculiar
Okay.
sight. And then we get to the final wish, where Huey asks, I want a mansion. And Louis asks, I want to live on a yacht. And then Dewey asks, I want it so that my head spins around constantly. And so, the genie grants these final wishes. The three brothers disperse and go and enjoy the treats of their wishes. They reunite after a year. So they're like, how are you guys doing? And Huey is like, yeah, so it's pretty great. I'm living the high life. My wife is total dynamite. And I'm pretty happy. And then Louis pops in with, yeah, no, it's going great with me. It's a party every day on that yacht. I agree. Huey's wife is total dynamite. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And then Dewey says, guys, I think I fucked up.
Oh my god! Oh my god.
Yeah, that's it.
I will say, Henry, I do respect the Carl Barks canon, but I also really like the 2017 adaptation for, like, distinguishing the personalities a little more.
Yes. Oh, I'm trying to think now if I have any, like, good jokes that I can tell before we leave things off, because I feel like, yeah, now I want the audience to part with a smile. Oh no!
We still have two more questions. I would tell for my Polish audience the Chromtag joke, but it would be difficult to translate. Anyway, B also asks, would you be super bummed if Obata went back to illustrating Oba's right-wing murder fantasies? For example, Death Note, Platinum End, once this has wrapped.
A bit. To be honest, I'm very glass half full about this series' presence in things, because it's like, oh, we actually get a pleasant, likeable series out of Obata that's doing well. What a treat. But obviously him and Oba are a very financially reliable duo, and they have a very good working relationship. They probably get a lot out of, so it's very likely that they're going to partner up again.
I would love nothing more than for Obata to go back to enabling Oba's conservative mad ravings. The fact is, I think his soapboxy style of conservatism, like his big speech in Platinum End about people complaining too much about discrimination, or like the overrepresentation of homosexuals or whatever it was, I think it has just become cringe at this point, even to conservatives. So if he starts writing something like that again, it will just be funny as fuck.
That's a thing. I don't know. It would be interesting to see how you escalate from there, given the trajectory of the modern conservative movements right now. Because, boy howdy, they're cringe as hell right now. I'm trying to imagine what an even more cringe thing would be.
Oh my god, Vespa Music returns! Did Gandhi have what it takes? In reference to the exhausted student council member who went stir-crazy over Taiyo and Azamichi initially being unable to distribute flyers to prospective parents at their school to practice their public speaking, and had the looming threat of penalisation hanging over him.
I will say that this just reminds me of one meme, namely how I defeated fascism with the power of love. Chapter 1, The Power of Love. The first step in my journey was realizing that it is impossible to defeat fascism with the power of love. Chapter 2, The Power of Incredible Violence.
Yeah, same energy.
I mean, he certainly had what it takes to cheat on his wives like crazy.
Ayo!
But I don't know. I feel like anyone that gets murdered because he was too nice to Muslims, I feel like that's gotta count for something, maybe.
Fair enough. And then one last minute entry from Vespa Music. How the fuck are you supposed to pronounce the German name? Take it away, Brie.
Sprechchor.
Okay,
Splenda.
it would be probably better if I asked Asha, because she actually studies German still, but I have studied German as a kid. So I believe it's Sprechchor.
Sprechchor.
I know that this middle consonant might be difficult because it's like here. Let me go to the IPA chart, International Phonetic Alphabet.
I am so sorry to any German-speaking listeners listening to this.
I'm not. I say as someone of German lineage, the mucusy language. We've brought this on ourselves.
I essentially stopped studying German because I had too many problems with my throat and I wasn't able to pronounce anything. But yeah, I believe it would be the palatal fricative. The voiceless palatal fricative.
Okay.
All right.
I guess that does us.
We have been done.
If you liked this kind of longer, more structured format in comparison to prior Hovin's Hideaway episodes, boy do I have the podcast for you. You can check all of this out on Podcastmon Adventures. You can read along with us with each arc. It's really easy to get into. If you have any lingering fondness or nostalgia towards Pokemon, I would really recommend checking Pokemon Adventures out and then giving us a listen. We delve into each arc. We have finished all the way up to Emeralds, and it's a super fun, exciting time. You can also find us on Duckface Diaries, a World Triggery2 podcast, at least myself and Brie here. We've still got that ongoing. We're up to volume 27 now, which I think is still the most recent as of the time of recording, and we're deep into the away mission test arc, which a lot of the fandom seem to hate, but we really like.
No regrets.
If you want a sports series that's also really deep into the politics of its sport, Henry, you can check out World Trigger because this battle manga essentially becomes a sports manga.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
And Bennett becomes a bureaucracy reality TV manga.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah, me in the first half, not gonna lie.
Yes, and you can find me on Blue Sky, Hovin with an H, where I post manga threads, and I'm going to be posting media threads, because I decided in the new year I'm completely going cold turkey on the dreaded Former Bird app.
Oh, absolutely. God, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and so I'll just be posting random musings, retweeting cool art, and yeah, posting about media that I am experiencing there. What would you two like to plug?
I guess you've all heard about the podcast I'm in. So Duckface Diaries, Podcastmon Adventures. You can find all of those at linktr.ee/WednesdayCheddar. That's my link tree. Still using the old name because that's what's in the old episodes. You can find all the podcasts there. You can also find my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Brie_Cheddar, where, as I said, I try to stream regularly with Asha once a week. And yeah, so go ahead and keep us company there. We always like to chat with people, and we have a fairly small audience, so it's always like a very cozy atmosphere. And my Linktree also has links to all the people that I've ever collaborated with. So that's linktr.ee/WednesdayCheddar. And yeah, if you want to support the Hideaway, support Duckface or Podcastmon, you can go on patreon.com/WednesdayCheddar.
As for me, listener, you can find me in a lot of different places online, but all of my stuff is nicely centralized at henrykathman.com, where you have links to my YouTube channel, my Blue Sky, my Tumblr, stuff with the Pink Owl podcast, and my Patreon. That's what pays the bills. And in the upcoming year, the plan is I have some very ambitious projects that I am gonna be looking to release, including some actual play series
Heck
stuff.
yeah.
God, maybe publishing a thing and like a
Ooh.
book. And I mean, it's an RPG book thing with Call of Cthulhu stuff, and it's like, oh God, I wrote like 150 pages of this thing, and it's like, oh God, I wrote a book, y'all. Oh my God. But yeah, keep an eye out for all that stuff at henrykathman.com.
Exciting. Oh yeah, also, Hovin, before you finish, a shout out to Zame, whose wonderful music you could hear throughout the show. Zame's music is also pinned at the very bottom of my link tree, so you can find him there.
Alright, hopefully you can find your ways out of the mountain of Kingdom Hearts figurines and get your way to the exit, and yeah, thanks for coming to the Hideaway. I don't know when I'm going to record another one of these, there's a lot to tidy up.
I need to think of a joke to leave you all with a smile.
Why did the chicken cross the road? Because his Godzilla figurine's eyes were lighting up in a very eerie way, and I think you should leave before Android Hindsight pulls some Skynet shit.
Hee hee. You easily spooked, silly sausage. It's been a pleasure to provide comments made with the benefit of hindsight and snarky banter. You all, take care.
And that's a wrap. So thank you very much.
Whee!